Hello again, I'm Kshitij, and today we are going to talk about a very important topic, and that is about mentorship. One of the biggest mistakes PhD students make or postdocs make is expecting that their PI or their supervisor is going to solve all their problems, every single problem. Either it is from statistics to experimental techniques to how to write a paper, how to submit a grant, how to connect, and how to apply for funding. The reality is that maybe it used to be the case a few decades back. It no longer is possible. No advisor can do it all, and there are many, many reasons behind it. One is that advisors have become extremely busy. The burden on the job is so much higher in just obtaining the grants, writing papers, and doing a lot of, for me, what is a big burden is the regulatory compliance, that the advisor doesn't really have the time to carefully look through your journey and advise you when you need the advice. So if, for example, you're making a mistake in going into a topic too deep on a segue where you might get lost, nobody would tell you till there is a chance to meet up with your advisor in which a certain kind of feedback could be provided. I notice many labs where students go through the whole PhD program having never applied to fellowships, having never applied for their own grants, having never really done anything beyond data generation. It's rather more common than not common. And the reason is not really that anybody is malicious, it's just that nobody has the time. And people sometimes get stuck in the techniques. They may know the way techniques work, but then there are nuances to the technique which comes from very deep and long-term training. And so you need mentors who can tell you many of the times, and I can tell you for myself as well as for most of my colleagues, you get rusted in your hands over time when you're sitting on your computer writing grants. You sometimes yourself stop remembering the minor nuances of every single technique. So your advisor may be able to catch something because they are much more experienced, but they may not necessarily be able to give you very specific advice as to why things work or things don't work. They may be able to if they've encountered it earlier, but they may not be able to de novo identify what is not working. So even technical advice may not all come from your advisor. Well, the crux of the matter is that your advisor is your most important mentor. That is why you have chosen the advisor, and hopefully he or she is a good mentor. But you need to really create what I like to call as a mentorship mapping, mentorship network, mentorship map of your whole life. And these include, of course, your scientific mentor, who is going to be your supervisor, but also your peer mentors, something most people actually ignore, your technical mentors or mentor, your networking mentor, and I should also put your life mentors. So let's go very briefly through all of them. I don't think much has to be talked about what your scientific mentor is. Well, you have come into a PhD, we have talked about it before, and most people instinctively know what they are, right? So let's not talk about the scientific mentor. And your actual supervisor may be all five, or maybe three of the five, right? So he or she may fill in the category as a primary mentor in all of them. But even then, you should work to create a networking map. And I will also talk to you about a caveat at the end of what to be careful about. So let's pick up the other one, and that is the peer mentors. Who are the peer mentors? Well, those are the senior graduate students and postdocs who are there to guide you. They will serve as your mentors also because as you grow up and become successful or become a professor somewhere or go into industry somewhere, you will likely keep in touch with these people in a much more close-knit way. And therefore, it is worthwhile investing in these relationships wherein these professional relationships also become self-rewarding for both of you. So sometimes, when new graduate students come, I haven't really encountered it, but I've seen it in other labs. They are a little frisky about giving some, some work which is really assisting another senior person. They think, well, I'm doing a PhD, I want my own project. Well, if you want your own project entirely and independently, you will also not get a chance to develop relationships with other people who are going to mentor you and help you. And if you do not provide the necessary nourishment for those mentorship to be developed, then those mentorships may not come to you, those advices may not come to you either. So invest in those relationships. But whatever you can provide more time, and that person can provide you probably much more experienced advice. They may even provide you advice about the supervisor's quirks or how to manage certain aspects of the supervisor's personality. Like, for example, some supervisors are not very disciplined, or some very timely, or others are extremely demanding. They can get, very, very pushy before grant submissions or a paper submission. And all of that, people may have developed techniques to manage that, right? So you could learn those techniques from them, like how do you manage it? Okay, you better be prepared about this. Always make sure you have your figures ready in this particular format, so that whenever you are asked sometimes in the middle of the night, you can just provide, right? So things like that. And that might ease your relationship with your main supervisor too. The third, and these supervisors, please remember, your peer supervisors are the most important, peer mentors are the most important mentors you will have, because these are the mentors who are going to live with you all your life, right? So your friends in your own class, but also senior people. You may not really develop a very friendly relationship necessarily with those people, but nevertheless, they will come in handy when you would need them. When you are in industry and they are at a different position, you might find that contact or that mentorship is extremely valuable. The third mentor is the technical mentors. This is more important than is realized. I'll spend much less time on it because it is, you understand what a technical mentors are. But do not rely entirely within your lab to learn techniques. Go learn it outside. Go learn it from your own friends in your own class. So, if you're doing a PhD, you presumably came in a class, right? And you took classes together. You probably made some friends. Go and learn what they're doing. Like in my case, I learned a lot by learning some, cardiac work from my cardiac friends, and some imaging or patch clamp work from my neuroscience friends, and sometimes some other kinds of work. You may never need them, but that technique, the familiarity with that technique. I can tell you, for example, many years later, just a few years back, we published a paper in which we needed patch clamp. We still did not do patch clamp. It's an extremely difficult technique to master if you don't do it. But nevertheless, we have got to understand what it means, right? In order to interpret the data someone else provides you. So all of that will be helpful. So expand your horizon technically. That's going to be extremely handy for you in your PhD and beyond. And certainly when you go to industry, you may not really get a job entirely based on the technique that you primarily learn. So your secondary, tertiary, the fourth, fifth, sixth step technique that you have little brush with might become very, very handy. And that is something you would be asked to work on later on, right? So just become technically proficient by creating technical mentors. And the fourth mentors are networking mentors. I frankly suffered personally by a lack of those in some sense. And it is for people who are a little bit introvert, you need to really find people who are not introvert. Okay, so get into those hubs, get into get close to a person who is able to connect you with hundreds of other people or tens of other people. Okay, so there are always people like that in your life who are the hubs. So if you are the hub, great, then you can be the networking mentor. But if you are a spoke somewhere, go near a hub. Don't be a single pin lying around in the ground, okay? Be near places where you will find it possible to get connected by a second order connection. Like on LinkedIn, right? Your first order, second order, third order. So your second order connection you should have a very, very large second order network, even if you are not a person who's very, very networky. There is a cost to networking. There's a huge cost to social networking. Not everyone is comfortable with it, and not everyone can play that game very well, but some people love it and they get a lot of energy from it. Go near them, remain connected to them, so that you could be connected to the right people when you need them in life. Okay, and nurture those relationships. It is very important to nurture those relationships. I'm giving you the least expensive strategy because it is much easier to find those 3 people in your professional network who are the hubs as compared to finding 30 other people from different walks of life, right? Those 3 people will be connected to 300 people in all sorts of walks of life. And it is much easier to actually be, leverage those relationships in a very non-linear way. Okay. The last mentors are the life mentors. Now, these are the most important ones, but those are the most difficult to find because you need to judge the people that they are the right people in which you can share certain vulnerabilities, some kind of a little tricky situation you've gotten into. You are running into some problem with your supervisor or co-supervisor or some other, colleague of yours. So make sure that you find the right people. And I can also say one thing. A lot of people will listen to you, but if you are a person who's going to be a crybaby and come and tell about, the travails of your life every single time, they might listen to you, but they will certainly also link you as a guy or a girl, who's not to be trusted. I mean, this person is always complaining. That's not the point. The point is develop relationship, and you can develop the best relationships if you shine in your own work. Okay, so the way to develop these life mentors could be to basically find people in different walks of life. So for example, people who are transitioning to postdoc, people who are going into industry, junior faculty, senior faculty, okay, more difficult to find, but develop certain relationships so that you can ask them for advice and go and ask them for advice directly. I'm planning to apply for this fellowship. I know that somebody else in your lab applied for this fellowship. Do you mind if I could get some input from from that person and obtain some kind of a draft to work on, for example, right? Things like that. That mentorship will be very, very helpful. The last thing I must say is that this is something I've noticed. I know so many people who don't even have 5 people they can genuinely themselves ask to get a recommendation from. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Okay, the whole academic world works on references. Okay, whether it is applying for fellowships, applying for grants, applying for a job, applying for anything, you need references. Nurture those references. Work on those references. Be careful about those references. Don't bother those references 100 times so that next time they will be very careful about giving you a reference. Okay, so, but at the same time, develop those relationships so that they think of you as a person worth providing a good recommendation for. I see so many people who just don't have anybody and they completely rely on the supervisors for references. Those references are basically telling the other person that you have developed a mentorship network. Okay, senior people who know you well enough to be able to write a few lines on your behalf, and that is a huge currency in academia. I'm going to talk more about it some other time about references, but develop those lessons. Last caveat: this is turning out to be a longer video than I intended, so I'm sorry, but one caveat I want to point out is that although I'm saying that you should develop a network of your mentors, be careful. Okay, don't just go willy-nilly and talk about all sorts of stuff to everybody. You may have a little issue going on with your supervisor, or you may have an issue with your colleague, but you go and tell someone, I'm having this particular issue, can you help me out? You may find that you are actually you are considered to be the person who's not trustworthy thereafter. Okay, be careful. At the same time, be careful that people whom you are developing, thinking of mentors, are not taking advantage of you. So they are not using your time or your technical proficiency. I mean, this applies less to PhDs, but can apply to postdoc. And I've seen it a lot applying to postdoc, I must say, where postdocs, sometimes from a different lab, who come to, to do a little work in someone's lab are just completely monopolized without even realizing how the authorships would be distributed, how the work would be distributed, how the credits would be distributed. And you have wasted a lot of effort, and more work, and worse, you've given a lot of your own technical proficiency to someone else on a platter. Be very careful. Not everybody's like that. Only very, very few people are like that. But you have to be careful that many a times the people who are more available, for that role may also be the people who, I mean, not necessarily, but some of them may be the people who are looking out for some help on their own side. Okay, so be careful about developing any relationship, and I think that is nothing to do with academic profession. This is something which is important in life. But create a mentorship map. You must have at least 5 people whom you can ask personally to write a recommendation on your behalf. Develop that relationship. You should have a few people beyond your supervisor to help you navigate certain parts that the advisor themselves have not probably navigated, right? If suppose, for example, you want to go into a particular type of industry, your advisor may have little idea about that at all. You might want to, for example, go into some NGO, or want to go into consultancy, or want to go into becoming a lawyer, a patent lawyer, for example. Many people after PhDs do that. And your advisor may have zero idea, may not know anybody who has that kind of a work path. So develop enough number of relationships during your PhD so that you can connect with them and remain connected with them, and ask them for help and advice when you need them. Okay, do not think your supervisor is a one man who knows everything. They don't. They are experts in limited subject matter. They may be the world expert in that limited subject matter, and they have lived a life, they have mentored many people, but they still are giving you a limited set of those 5 type of mentorship. Okay, so develop all those 5 type of mentorships, and thereafter, and come out of your PhD as a person who has created a pretty large leverage in life. You can really milk and take advantage of and grow with as you move out of academia, or move on into academia, into a further path. Okay, so till next time, hopefully with a shorter video. Goodbye.